Welcome to the fall break art for our senior program. If you registered, you have a bag that looks like this with a lot of interesting pieces in it. You have a brochure of art books for kids. There's a section on drawing and a section on painting. We'll put that aside for now. You also have a couple of smaller pieces of watercolor paper, a long strip of watercolor paper, a package of watercolors, so it's a great little palette of 8 colors. And we also have a permanent marker. So, as we all know, permanent means it's there forever. So, use with caution. Try not to get it anywhere but on your paper, because once it's somewhere else, that's where it's going to stay. So, also when you use it, when you're finished using it, make sure that you click it so it stays, it doesn't get all dried out, so you can still use it. You also have 3 sheets of watercolor paper, and there's also a piece of paper in between. So that's what you've got in your package, and we're going to get started with today's lesson. So for today's lesson, of course, we're going to need our paints. Yours looks a little different. Mine is one that we've been using here in the studio. Of course, you're going to need water for your paints. And I also like to keep handy some paper towel for accidents, perhaps. And I'm going to put those to the side for the moment. We also are going to be using our permanent marker. We're going to be using the long strip of watercolor paper that we had in our package. 1 piece of watercolor paper and 1 piece of printer paper. I think we'll start with the printer paper first, and we're just going to do a little bit of practice with some lines. We are going to draw some straight lines, some vertical lines that are going to come straight down. When we do our other picture, we will do it on our original one. I'm drawing on a piece of cardboard, so you're going to see a little bit of bumps on mine. But I like using the cardboard for when I'm working on watercolor, because that way if I paint over or spill over, it helps absorb the paint instead of getting it all over my table or whatever. So we're going to draw some straight lines. Some of our straight lines are going to be longer, and they may even be parallel lines, so they're 2 beside each other, and we might even just fill them in with dashes. We also will be drawing lines that may be not quite parallel, but they might come down and have a bit of a curve to them at the ends. We're going to close them off and maybe color that in so it's dark and thick. We may have just short little lines. And what we're going to do with these is we are going to add branches, because these are going to be trees. So we might want to do something really abstract and maybe put a big line on the bottom and little lines along the top. We might want to draw curved lines coming out from our tree. Curve some lines up. And maybe throw another one down there. So we're going to just sort of practice these shapes, and you might want to have something wispy coming out. So we might have, and then draw little branches coming out from our branches. And this one, we might just have something like that popping out. So again, so we're just drawing some straight lines. Drawing maybe, like I say, with these ones, you might just want to do little black circles like berries and put them on trees like that. That's up to you. So now we're going to actually move over to putting our pen together for now. And we're going to use our strip of paper, that long strip of paper that you should have in your package. And we're going to get out our water and our paints. Now you can choose a color. I usually like using something like a red or blue for this. But we're going to wet our brush. And I think I'm going to do blue. And I'm going to add water to my blue paint, which is just pigment and fillers. And I'm just going to go around in little circles and load my brush. And I don't know if you can see or not that I've got quite a bit of paint on my brush. When we do watercolors, what we're going to do is we're going to just with slight pressure make a little line and pull our brush up. We're going to do it again without adding any paint. Pull our brush up. Again, just keep going. And you're going to see that our brush will eventually get kind of dry. And when it starts to get dry, you can add a little bit more water and keep going. So you can see that paint will last quite a while. And you'll also notice that the amount of color has changed in a grade. So when we do our painting, you may want to use more or less color. You can do that by adding water or by adding paint. So now we are going to get started on our drawing. So let's get our watercolor paper out. And we are going to, instead of doing portrait, we're going to do landscape. So we're going to turn it sideways like this. So it's long on the bottom and shorter on the top. We're going to draw a series of trees along the bottom. So those shapes that we practiced, and we're going to draw them so that maybe we're going to take up the bottom half of the paper. So I'm going to draw one that maybe is fairly thin and maybe is one that had the wisps on it. So we're going to go maybe a little one on top. And then I maybe want to draw one that had those round shapes maybe. So maybe I'll do a couple of circles and add them together. It's kind of like they're berries or something, but it's abstract tree. And maybe some of those berries you want to color in black or not. And I'm going to do one that we had earlier that was sort of parallel with, and it kind of reminds me of birch trees or maybe aspen trees. And I think my last one over here is going to come down with a bit of a base to it, and it's going to be maybe more like a Christmas tree. And we're going to close up our permanent marker. There's not a lot to be done in this one. In a sense, I'm just going to clean out my brush because I don't want to use blue on my tree. I think that since we've just seen the beautiful colors of fall, I'm going to do pretty much some fall colors and maybe some orange will work. So I'm going to load my brush with the orange, and I'm just going to give it a general, maybe add a little bit more water in there, sort of general shape of a tree and leaves. Now, as you can see, by using the permanent marker, when we pull our color through, the black is staying right where we wanted it to. Now, if you want to make it a little darker, kind of give it a shade on one side, I'm just going to add a little bit extra pigment and paint to my brush and adding it on there so it has a bit of depth. Now, I think my little tree, berry tree, I think my little berry tree is going to be red. I see a lot of trees like that when I'm on my walk in the neighborhood, and I'm going to kind of give it a nice round shape. Add some water to that and drag my colors around. If you get too much water on your paper, you don't like the way it looks, you can always, if you have some paper towel handy, you can always pop some paper towel on there and kind of sop up some of that extra. The next one kind of runs, like I say, an aspen or a birch tree. So I think they usually have a nice gold color to them this time of the year, if they haven't all blown off at this point. And they usually have sort of a tall, wispy look to them. And since I said about evergreenish, they do tend to be evergreen, so I'm going to pop some green in there. Not what I usually think of as fall colors, but I'm just going to kind of give it a little wash of green. And if I have two objects that are the same in size, and I have one in front of me, and I have one away from me, the one here in my hand looks pretty big, but the one back here doesn't look so big until we put them together and we realize that they are the same size. So my point for this would be, if you'd like to draw some more trees in the background, like you're in a forest, which would be lovely, now that you know where your big trees are, you might want to draw some in the back. But we're not going to draw them as big because they are not in at the back. They are not in the front, in the foreground. So anything that might be in the back, we might see. I'm going to throw on a couple of little more trees. You don't have to draw more trees if you don't want to draw more trees, but if you do, they just wouldn't be as big. And in fact, They may not have as much detail to them if they're in the back. And what you can also do at this point, if you want, to suggest that there's more in the background, but is just to kind of fill in some shapes in the colors that we're using to suggest that we have some more things happening in the background. Just by blending your colors together. And there is our forest.